In many seminars, we can see that saying that the new constitution has made a better distribution of revenue among states and among municipalities. So the scenario that I'm trying to build is, we have a country with a GDP concentration in 2 regions. We have a high tax burden, the second item, and also a lack of regional policy targeting economic development in less developed regions. That's the scenario I've been constructing. So what I'm going to show now is that fiscal incentives can be used by states as a tool to balance regional inequalities. So specifically now, I'm going to talk what we have been doing in state of Ceará, trying to compensate the industrial concentration, regional inequalities, and so on. First, I have to say, even though the issues in the book of the 5th ITD says that tax competition can undermine revenue, my experience is the opposite. A tax competition can raise revenue of the state that is decreasing your sales tax. Remember that states in Brazil, they have only 2 major taxes. Sales tax, it's kind of VAT, kind of a value-added tax, and motor vehicle tax. Basically, most other property taxes, local government, and all the others belongs to the federal government. So even though the sales tax of the states represents about 7% of GDP, but it's the only one that the state governments have in Brazil. So I'm going to show that fiscal incentives do not necessarily cause reductions in tax revenues. It's the opposite, which you may think. Second, tax competition does not necessarily reduce the state's capacity to provide public service. It's the opposite. Because if revenue increases, you're going to be able to provide more service in education, safety, health, and so on. See what happened in the state of Ceará. Inflation in Brazil is around 5.5% per year, 5.5% a year. You have the cumulative growth of inflation rate from 2007, when I went in charge of the State Finance Secretary of State of Ceará. It's 2007, January 2007 until today. So you can see that inflation in Brazil was 37% from 2007 to 2012, but at the same time, with some measures that were taken, and I'm going to tell you, I left the final to tell you exactly what was done, you can see that state revenue risen 100%, almost 3 times more what inflation rate was during the same period. So there is something going on in here in state of Ceará. Again, that's why the federal government is trying to pay so much attention to this state. I've been discussing with Ocaso from the Federal Internal Revenue Service, from Luis Vilela, from IDB, even, and we discussed a lot among those issues. And as a matter of fact, I want to thank for this opportunity to share this experience with the whole world. As a matter of fact, this table, revenue was increased so much that the percentage of current revenue of state of Ceará that goes to investment, in other words, investment over current revenue, is around 1/4, 25% goes to investment. And I asked my students to find out this relation for all the states in Brazil. And for my surprise, state of Ceará is the state that has the highest level of investment due to those actions that I'm going to show right now, which means around 3 billion reais divided around 1 billion and $6 million per year in investment for a small state in Brazil. Also, GDP for the state of Ceará, you have in this table, this chart shows on your left-hand side the economic growth of state of Ceará for each year. This is not cumulative. This is for each year. And on the right-hand side, you have the rate of growth of the country as a whole. So you can see, even with the international crisis in 2009, where Brazil had a negative rate of growth of your economy, state of Ceará grew 3.1%, which for me is pretty high in the international context and also in the context of Brazil. Now, what actions can be done when you reduce tax, sales tax? Remember that sales tax is almost the only tax that states have in Brazil. So, since the industrial sector is concentrated in the south and in the southeast, most of the big commercial firms are located in the south and the southeast, it was necessary for me to give fiscal incentives if there is anyone in São Paulo deciding to build a new plant to increase their production capacity, come to the state of Ceará, that you would pay a lower sales tax if you come to my state. But you cannot only do this, because that will make a competition very high among states, mainly north, northeast, with competing with the states in the south and in the southeast. You have to do 3 additional measures. The first measure is, what I did in state of Ceará was the following. At the same time that I decided to reduce the sales tax, Brazil, the average tax, the sales tax is 17%. So if I decided to decrease the tax rate from 17 either to 12 or to 7, and remember, those reductions are done by law, by the state parliament. The state parliament has to approve those decreases in sales tax. There is not a decision of the state secretary or a decision of the governor. This is a law